Good morning, everybody. How are you? And good afternoon if you're on the East Coast. Thank you for joining us during your lunch hour. This is Shlomi Katan. I'm an executive director at the XPRIZE Foundation, where I lead the Barbara Bush Foundation Adult Literacy XPRIZE. And thank you for joining us for this first in a series of webinars about the community's competition. As they say on planes, if you're not here for this webinar, now's your time to leave before we close the doors. So this will be about a 45-minute conversation. We're going to take the first half talking about the why, the who, the what, and the how of the community's competition of the Adult Literacy XPRIZE. Tell you a bit about the grand challenge as we see it, talk about what XPRIZE is, and then cover competition basics and how to compete. And the second half of the webinar will be devoted to Q&A. One logistical item, there is a Q&A feature in Zoom. So if you have your menu bar open, you'll be able to see a Q&A. Please put your questions there so that we may be able to track them and answer them at the end. There are too many people for us to have everybody's mic going at once. And so we ask that you use that feature in order to communicate with us. And a second important logistical item, you can always go to communities.xprize.org to learn more about the community's competition, view important competition documents such as the guidelines and scoring rubrics, and register to compete. So why are we launching the community's competition? And I think this takes us back to something that is at the core of the Barbara Bush Foundation Adult Literacy XPRIZE. And that is that the United States and the rest of the world is witnessing an increase in inequality. The income gap, the wealth gap is widening. What you have here in front of you is a chart showing the distribution of wealth in the United States by families. In the bottom 50 percentile, so that is a sliver of gray at the bottom of this chart. That is very difficult to see. The holdings of the 51st to the 90th percentile, that is that second strand, and the top 10% of families by wealth and how much wealth they hold. In all, 76% of all US wealth is held by the top 10% of families in this country. This, by the way, is in trillions of dollars. In a 25-year period between 1989 and 2013, as tracked by the Congressional Budget Office, the bottom 50%, their holdings remained stagnant. The middle, that 51 to 90th percentile of families, their holdings grew by about 66%. The top 10% of family, their holdings increased by 155%. They more than doubled. This, of course, is tied to education. Education contributes to family wealth. So what we have here is median family wealth by education group. This is the highest grade level achieved by a member of the family. You'll see that those with graduate degrees, their median family wealth is north of $400,000 and has been for the past couple of decades since the turn of the century. Bachelor's degrees, those also hold up well in terms of wealth. But the bottom three groups, those who have some college, those who have completed a high school but no college, and those who have less than a high school education, their median wealth in 2013 was less than $50,000 across the board. That is 65% of families in the US. So we have this widening education gap. Education contributes to it. At the same time, we have a skills gap. So there are 5.5 million open jobs in the United States. While unemployment has gone down, private job openings have gone up. And so we have this gap between what employers need and what employees are looking for. Importantly, over the coming decade or two, and definitely over the next generation, automation is going to widen that income and that wealth gap. So the less that you make in hourly wages, the more likely your job is to be replaced by automation. So what you have here is a chart showing the probability of automation. There are a number of factors that go into this, and you can read this white paper called "Is This Time Different? The Opportunities and Challenges of Artificial Intelligence." And this is somebody who worked in the Obama White House, Dr. Furman, and taking a number of factors into account to understand what makes a position more likely to be automated. If you are earning less than $20 an hour, if those are your median hourly wages, less than $20 an hour, 83% likelihood that those jobs will be automated. Those in the $20 to $40 an hour range have a 31% probability of automation. Those who make more than $40 an hour have a decreasing likelihood and significantly lower likelihood that those jobs will be automated, at least in the next generation. And so that makes it much more pressing that we address the needs of those low-skilled, low-income workers. And all this continues a 40-year trend. So you might be familiar with this chart. This is called the Great Uncoupling. In the post-World War II era in the United States, for a long time, increases in productivity also fell in line with increases in hourly compensation. So this is an index chart. Back in the early 1970s, that began to diverge. So while productivity in the United States continued to grow, hourly compensation began to stagnate. And as that stagnates and productivity grows, what you have is something that Robert Reich mentioned a few years back, that we have the biggest gap between corporate earnings and employee wages since the Great Depression. That was true when he said it. It's not as true now because it's dipped a little bit, but we are still at historic highs in terms of the gap between our productivity and what people make. And that is all the more true for adults who lack basic skills. But this is not a new challenge. Martin Luther King was aware of it over 50 years ago. Granted, he was prescient, but at the same time, this is something we've been aware of as a society for a while. It is becoming more and more urgent as we're seeing bigger changes in computational technology, information technology, and what that means for automation and artificial intelligence in the years to come. So how does this relate to adult literacy? Well, 36 million adults in the US lack basic English literacy skills. And this impacts their lives and those of their children and communities. They are more likely to live in poverty, more likely to be unemployed or underemployed. And as you saw in an earlier chart, more likely to be automated out of a job in the generation to come. So a lot of trends that make it all the more urgent that we address the needs of low-skilled, low-literacy adults in the United States. That 36 million person figure, though, as a rate statistic, is the same thing that we've been seeing for going on 30 years in the United States. So for a long time, we've known that this is an issue. We've known that this is a challenge, but we haven't been able to move the needle on it. What we have works, right? One-on-one tutoring works, small class tutoring works. We know that those approaches are effective and efficacious, but they just don't scale. Today, we can address the needs of just about 5 to 6% of the adult learner population in the United States. That means there are 34 million learners who are not enrolled in classroom programs who could benefit from these services. So how do you do that? How do you address the need of so many people in the United States and even more globally? There are about 780 million people around the world who lack basic literacy skills, even in their first language. How do you address the needs of so many learners when we know that scaling one-on-one tutoring just doesn't work? We can't train 36 million tutors. So at XPRIZE, what others see as challenges, we also see as the world's greatest opportunities. XPRIZE is the global leader in designing and implementing innovative competition models to solve humanity's grand challenges. We've awarded, as of this past Saturday, $50 million in prizes. We have $120 million in past and active prizes that we've run, ranging from the first, which was the Ansari XPRIZE. That was a competition that led to the first private space flight in human history, to the NRG COSIA Carbon XPRIZE, which seeks to recycle carbon and turn it into useful products. Our competitions have inspired innovations from private space flight to 100 mile per gallon equivalent cars, to learning tools that can impact the lives of hundreds of millions of unschooled children throughout the world. And then, of course, the Adult Literacy XPRIZE. Our mission with this competition, with the Barbara Bush Foundation Adult Literacy XPRIZE, presented by Dollar General Literacy Foundation, is to empower millions of adult learners to acquire the skills that they need to advance their education, find better work, or simply read a bedtime story to their kids. That's what we're looking to do. We launched this competition 3 years ago. We actually launched it on the 90th birthday at the 90th birthday party of former First Lady Barbara Bush. We had over 700 people register to compete, and 109 teams from around the world actually form and begin the competition. Of those, 86 were based in the US. It was the largest domestic competitor pool we had ever had for an XPRIZE at that point. Of those 109 teams, 41 submitted a fully formed, fully functioning app that was available on Google Play. Our judges, just over a year ago, selected, of those 41, 8 competitors to be semifinalists and be put into a field trial. That field trial had over 12,300 people registered for the field test, 12,300 adult learners. Of those, over 7,800 tested in at the level that we need. So those are people testing at a 3rd grade or below level in English literacy. The field test is approximately evenly split between native speakers of English and native speakers of Spanish. It's been ongoing for a year at this point, and it will continue until the end of October of 2018. So a full 15-month field trial with over 7,000 adult learners. And right now we are bringing samples of those learners back for 5 finalists. We, on this past Saturday, announced the 5 finalists of the Adult Literacy XPRIZE team stage. And so we also on Saturday launched the Communities Competition. What the Communities Competition is a $1 million challenge to transform the lives of 1 million adults. What we are asking communities and organizations across the country to do is empower low literacy adults in their communities, and I'll get to how we define community, to download and use these effective and convenient and private mobile learning tools that we've been testing for free. So these 5 tools that we've been testing with thousands of learners in Los Angeles, Dallas, and Philadelphia, we are from those going to select the best one. We're going to announce the winners early 2019. And all those apps that meet a minimum threshold of performance between the pre-test, which was administered a year ago to the learners, and a post-test, which is being administered between now and the end of October. All those, of the 5 apps, those that meet a minimum performance threshold will be eligible for distribution in the Communities Competition. Those are the apps that you will be able to distribute to learners in your communities to use for free. So how do you win the Communities Competition? It's a 2-phase challenge. In the first one, you tell us how you're going to revolutionize adult education in your community. The 50 best proposals will each win $10,000. That phase of the competition launched this past Saturday, June 23rd. It continues until December 21st of this year, and I'll get into the timeline in a little bit. And all we're asking you to do is tell us how you are intending to change the way that you reach adult learners in your communities, why your approach will be impactful, why it is feasible, and why it has the opportunity to scale. In phase 2, which launches on April 1st of 2019, we will award $500,000 split 3 ways based on competitor tier to the 3 competitors, 1 in each of those tiers, who recruit the most people to download and use the free proven effective apps. So today we're going to focus more on phase 1 than on phase 2. I understand you might have questions about phase 2, but we'd like to focus today's conversation more on phase 1. So phase 1, tell us how. What we are asking you to do is detail how you're going to increase access to adult education for learners using the apps from the Adult Literacy XPRIZE team stage. It's a grant proposal. We're calling it the proposal phase. And that's what we want to know. If we recognize that the biggest challenge facing adult education in the United States is access. If 95%, 34 million people who lack basic skills can't access the educational tools that they need, we want to know how you're going to change that. And these proposals will be judged for their potential for impact, their innovation, their feasibility, their scalability, and durability. And you can view a detailed scoring rubric for phase 1 at communities.xprize.org/about/scoring. And we'll show that URL later in today's conversation. What is the process for competing? First, you need to register. So you could go to communities.xprize.org and click the register button there, or you can go to ids.xprize.org/communities. That skips the communities.xprize.org website and takes you directly to where the register button would take you. You create a user profile on that platform. That is our program operations platform, or our prize operation platform. We sometimes call it POP. If you compete in this competition, you will sometimes hear us refer to it as the POP. Once you have registered as a user, you will create a team profile. This is your competing team. Then you submit your application. What you'll see when you have created your team profile in the POP is a series of quote unquote activities. These activities are the different forms and applications that we're asking you to fill out. We've split the application into a number of parts rather than to one lengthy application, but overall it is a relatively straightforward proposal that we're asking you to complete. 2 important deadlines. To create a team profile, you need to do that by 5 p.m. Pacific time, December 8th, 2018. And then you must submit your application no later than 5 p.m. Pacific time, December 21st, 2018. So 2 important deadlines. The first is to create a team profile. The second is to submit your application. After those applications have been submitted, they will go through a peer review process. So everybody who has filled out an application will review and score 5 other applications against 5 criteria. In order to ensure fairness of that process, we are normalizing those scores, and you can see how we're doing that on our website as well. You go to communities.xprize.org/about/fairness. That will narrow the field down to up to 100 competitors who will move on to the expert review. From that expert review, the milestone award will be awarded to 50 milestone winners, each of whom will receive a $10,000 prize purse. And that takes us through March of 2019. The other 3 I will touch upon, or the other 3 steps in the process I'll touch upon quickly now, although again, today's focus is on phase 1 of the competition. After you have submitted your application, there will be a period from January until the end of March where all competitors will begin to prepare for the deployment phase. So during that phase, you will receive a referral code. That will be our system for tracking which of the downloads belong to you as a competitor. And you'll be able to begin prepping for deployment during that phase. Then beginning April 1st and until August 31st, 2019, you will distribute the apps to your learners, to the members of your communities. And then the top 10 teams in the different tiers, based on download and usage metric, will undergo a final judge's review. This is to ensure the durability of what you have done. So that's the competition process. Importantly, I keep referring to communities. We define communities very broadly. A community can be virtual, it can be physical, it can be local, it can be regional, it can be a state, it can be national. You can have worked with adult learners in the past or not directly provided adult education services to adult learners, although you might work with clients and stakeholders who are indeed adult learners. We're defining communities broadly because we fully recognize and believe that adult literacy is a challenge that impacts all of us. It impacts all of us where we live, where we work, and in our daily lives. And so we are looking for innovation amongst organizations, individual, for-profits, nonprofits, government agencies, school districts around the country to address this grand challenge and reach more learners where they are so they can learn anytime, anywhere using these effective and free tools. I mentioned a few deadlines, but here they are again. We launched the competition this past week. December 8th, you will need to register your team before 5 p.m. Pacific time on that day. Proposal phase applications are due by 5 p.m. Pacific time on December 21st, 2018. And the Milestone Award winners will be announced March of 2019. Then April 1st through August 31st of 2019 is the deployment phase, with the communities competition winners announced in September of 2019. So how do you get started? First, as we said earlier, go to communities.xprize.org. You can learn more about the competition there. You can download, you can view the guidelines. You can view the scoring rubric. You can also access the prize operations platform. And through that, view the application and other materials. So when you're on communities.xprize.org, click on register. There's a nice yellow button in the upper right corner. Click on that. You will create a user profile, then create a team and start your application. I've mentioned a few URLs during this presentation. Here they are again. This is where you can access some of the more important information and begin to create your profile. So with that, we'd like to now open it up to Q&A. I imagine you have a number of questions, and I am happy to answer them. That's a great question. So Gene Hillman asked, will we be able to try or see the 5 teams apps before April 1st so we know if we want to endorse a solution? I'm trying to click on answer live here. So my cursor is not cooperating. So all 5 finalists are available to be viewed at adultliteracy.xprize.org/teams. There you can see all 5 finalists. They are in alphabetical order: Amrita Create, Ado Cognita, CellEd, Learning Upgrade, and People for Words. You can visit their websites. You can view them in Google Play and try them out. The versions that you'll be able to access publicly might differ slightly from the ones that are being deployed in our field trial, but they are substantively similar to them, and so you'll be able to get a sense of how they work, what they do, and the different features. I will say this. This field trial is highly focused on the effectiveness and efficacy of these apps. We want to make sure that whatever is available to learners is top notch. So far, we've been seeing tremendous results from our field testing. We're very happy with how things are going. And I'm sure if you look into these 5 teams, you'll learn more about them and see the great work that they've been doing. Not just as part of the Adult Literacy XPRIZE, but as part of their regular everyday jobs, because all 5 of these teams, this is not simply a competition for them. It is their passion. It is their livelihood. These are their businesses. This is what they focus on, and their products work well. So you'll be able to view the apps before then. I mentioned earlier, to be eligible for the communities competition, an app must have met a minimum threshold during field testing of performance gains between the pre-test and the post-test. By the way, the pre-testing and post-testing is using a nationally recognized, commonly used, standardized assessment for adult learners. And we're using that with both native speakers of English and native speakers of Spanish. So you will know which apps are available for download in the communities competition ahead of April 1st. Gina asked, I'm specifically interested in People for Words. They did not have a video. Can we actually see the app now and play it? Yes. So for any of these apps, you can search for them in Google Play. If you have an Android phone, I forgot to mention these apps, while some of them are available on iOS, so they will be available on Apple devices. We, as XPRIZE, are only testing them on Android, and in the communities competition, they will only be available for Android. These, so you can look for them at play.google.com or visit the Google Play on your Android device. And when you do that, you'll be able to search for each of the apps. You can search for People for Words, and you'll be able to find it in Google Play, download it, and use it as you may. You can also contact the teams directly if you have any questions. They are public, or their names are public in terms of who the finalists are, and I'm sure they'd be happy to speak with you if you reached out to them. I know that some of the teams, their products are already being used in libraries, school districts, and other adult education settings around the country. Good question. So what if you have an iPhone, or can you use a PC? That depends on the app. Some of these apps are available, for example, CellEd and Learning Upgrade, I know for a fact, are available on multiple platforms, not just Android. I can't speak to the availability on other platforms for the other 3, for People for Words, Amrita, Create, or Ado Cognita, although I think at least one of them is available on more platforms than Android. But you can reach out to those teams and see what operating systems their products work on, and use them on those as well. Oh, clicked the wrong button. Are there more questions for our Q&A? Okay. You can obviously continue to submit your questions. I did want to touch on the proposal form and the process of signing up and beginning to fill it out. So as mentioned before, go to communities.xprize.org, click on register. You'll create a user profile, then log back in, create your team profile, and then you'll be able to start seeing these activities. The activities, the first activity, you'll see there are 8 activities in total. The first activity is a terms and conditions document. It's a click-through agreement that has you acknowledge that you understand the terms of the competition and that you understand that the guidelines of the competition govern the competition and set the rules, as do the scoring rubric and all other documents available through the prize operation platform. The last of the activities, the 8th one, is actually also an acknowledgement form, having you acknowledge that you understand that only legal entities duly constituted in the United States are eligible for the prize purses in both phase 1 and phase 2. You might ask why. Our focus is on the United States, in part because the challenge here is large enough. And it also in part differs from, at least the causes of adult low literacy in the US differ from the causes of adult low literacy in other countries. Yes, it always boils down to access to quality education throughout your life. But with that, the solutions have been tested in the US, and the community's competition is therefore focused on the US as well. The other 6 activities inside the prize operations platform are the application form. They include who you are, so we want to know more about you, what you plan on doing, what is your strategy, how are you going to recruit learners and have them download and use these apps, and finally, why is that scalable? Those are the 3 core components of the application. We also ask that you submit a 30 to 90-second video introducing your team and what you plan to do. We ask that you submit a 100-word executive summary. So in 100 words, tell us who you are and what you intend to do. And finally, we're asking that you submit samples, not all of it, but samples of recruiting materials that you intend to use. For example, if you're going to use flyers throughout, if you're a physical community and you intend to use flyers, we'd like to see those flyers. There are 2 reasons for it. One is to make sure that all competitors adhere to the style guide and to make sure that whatever information is being put out there aligns with the rules of the competition and the guidelines that we've set for that. It also is to ensure, and I know those of you on this webinar are not likely to fall into this category, but we want to ensure that all competitors constantly have the best interests of learners in mind. We want to make sure that no one is crossing any lines in terms of collecting information about learners or making claims that could be deemed to be misleading. But again, we're only asking for a sample of those so that so that your peers and the judges can review those. And that is the application process for phase 1. We've mentioned learners and who they are. I know some of you know about our field testing, and I want to draw a distinction between the learner population in field testing and the learner population in the communities competition. In field testing, for reasons of the competition and to make sure that we have appropriately sized samples to be able to determine a winner of that stage, we have focused the field test on adults who read at or below the equivalent of a 3rd grade level, who speak either English or Spanish as their first language and are learning to read in English. In the communities competition, that demographic is wider. We are not going to test the adult learners. We are assuming that if they use the apps consistently, which is really the measure of whether or not somebody wins phase 2 of the competition, if they use the apps consistently, then they are most likely adult learners because the apps are relevant to them. But it is expanded. So rather than 3rd grade or the 3rd grade equivalent or below, we are looking at a much broader spectrum of literacy skills. If you work with folks who are studying for their high school equivalency, they might still benefit from these apps. These apps are pretty robust. They have quite a strong numbers they have quite a breadth of content. And also, you are not limited to recruiting learners who speak English or Spanish. These apps work with learners of all languages. We know that, for example, Learning Upgrade at a minimum is being used by adult learners who speak other languages as their first language as well. Jean Hillman asked, do learners in the communities competition need to prove their age? That is a great question. No. There is no feasible way for us to sample all learners and see that they are that they fall within the age range. We will, however, and this is I mentioned earlier, and I'll put this back up if I can get to it. So if you look at 9, the judging and awards, the top 10 performing teams based on download and usage metrics will undergo a final judges review. And that's where the judges will verify for those teams that are likely to win because they have met those download and usage metrics, that indeed you were focused on the intent of the competition. The intent of the competition is to distribute these apps to adults and not to children. We therefore want to avoid scenarios where a competitor is distributing these apps to kids in a classroom. That is not the intent of the competition. And so we want to avoid those scenarios, and that's why there will be that judges review at the end. That being said, these apps are often used in family literacy settings. I know Vinod is on the line. I'll tell a quick anecdote. Vinod is the team lead for Learning Upgrade, one of the finalist teams. And I'll tell a quick anecdote about one of the ways that their app has been used in the field. There's a migrant education program that was using their product with kids, actually. And what they began to see is that those kids, together with the parents, were using the apps, and the parents were logging in and using their kids' app to learn. This was prior to our field testing, and so we were focused. So Learning Upgrade was being used by families together. That is definitely a way that families learn. We know that family literacy, 2-generation learning is an effective approach. And we don't want to discourage that. So we definitely encourage you to recruit parents, especially if they're using the products with their kids. But we want adults to be the ones downloading and using the apps. Gina asked, what age is considered an adult? 18 and over, that is correct. We're seeking 18 and over, ideally. We do have, so we are running up on our time. We can take a couple more minutes if there are any questions. If there are not, our next webinar is Thursday, July 26th, also at 9 a.m. Pacific, 12 p.m. Eastern Time. These webinars will be happening on the last Thursday of the month. Going forward, they are informational webinars. In each one of these webinars, we'll be providing more information about the competition. But again, you can go to communities.xprize.org, view the guidelines, log in to the prize operations platform once you've registered, and through that, view the application and access the information that you need to be able to put together an application that can place in the top 50 based on the peer and judges reviews, and win $10,000. With that, if there are no other questions, thank you all for joining us today. We hope that all of you compete and help transform 1 million lives through literacy. Thank you.